Hello again. Taking another look back at old games from once distant past, and I found my sights landing on 2011, where I found this little gem, Noire. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. I have trouble with my R's. But, coming out almost 9 years ago, took a look at this game, and interesting enough, probably more interesting than this game itself, is the troubled development of said game. There's a YouTuber by the name of Matt Muscles. He has a series of videos called What Happened, and I highly recommend you check out that video. I'll leave the link in the description below for that video. It's very fascinating. It talks about the very troubled history of the development of this game, how, quite honestly, this game should have never come out. That's how bad of a development cycle they had on this very ambitious project. But the question is, 9 years later, is this game worth owning? I honestly don't know. Let's get into it.
Hold it right there!
I'm gonna rub the department's nose in it.
Roust them, beat them, and restore some fervor to your police work. I did it for you, and that's how you repay me!
So, Noire, on the surface, is a detective game. You're basically playing a detective, Cole Phelps, and you basically have to solve all these cases. Now, you start off, there's basically 4 chapters in this game. There's traffic, murder, vice, and arson. So traffic, typically all of these will involve a murder of some kind. There's a few cases that don't start off with murder, but for the most part, you're looking at a dead body. And basically how one case works is you get called to a crime scene, you look for clues, you track down the clues, you interview people, you determine if those people are lying or telling the truth, and then at the end of the case you have to determine who you're going to arrest. Now typically you'll get 2 options, there's a few times you get 3. In total, it's kind of a messy system when you really look at it. But if you step back and look at it, it's actually an amazing game system. This is really more the pioneer of potentially a new type of genre. Unfortunately, no one really took off with this because I haven't seen many games that utilized these unique gameplay features, such as having to determine if a person is lying to you just by how their face is reacting. Now, most of the time it's really on the nose. They're not looking at you and they're like fidgeting, but there's a couple of times in this game I had serious problems figuring out if someone was lying to me or not. And then finding clues. I mean, in concept, this game is really amazing. But in execution, it has a lot of problems. So for starters, the game's a little bit too long for its own good. The game really kept my interest from traffic well into murder, but the moment I got to vice, I started losing interest. And I pushed on. It's like, is this going to end soon? And then finally I got to arson, and that's when the game really started to show that they rushed a lot of development, because there were a few times during the arson chapter where there's a couple of cases in that profession that basically I was stuck for an hour trying to figure out how to move on in the story, and basically I had to find one specific clue that was not well explained where it was, and I had to go online and find out what to do next, which in my opinion is a cardinal sin of any type of game out there. If I can't enjoy the game from beginning to end without having to go online to figure out how to do the next part, the game has failed to a certain degree with me. And unfortunately, LA Noire did this. I had to go online at least 3 times, pretty much closer to the end with the arson cases, to figure out what to do next, because they did not do a good job developing those areas of the game to tell me what to do next. This is kind of important. I can't speak to the PlayStation side of it, but if you're getting this on Xbox 360 and you're looking at the available DLC and you see that the season pass is available for like $7 to $10, where you get all the DLC with it, which is a much better deal than buying it individually, do not get it, because Rockstar stopped supporting that. It's still available, the season pass, but the only way you can get it is if you get it in through the game, and you can't access the storefront through the game anymore. So the only way you can get DLC content is from Microsoft outside the game when you go into the, options here. You can't get the DLC through the game anymore, so that's worth noting. They still offer the season pass. Okay? I learned the hard way. Getting the season pass for dirt cheap and then finding out, no, you can't get any of the DLC with that anymore. Not possible. So, just something worth keeping an eye out for if you get this for Xbox 360. And that's not the only problem with this game. For some real reason, it's not explained till the end, but you're forced to watch these weird Asian theater World War II flashback memories that really, for the most part, have nothing to do with the story. It's not till like the very end that you basically kind of go, that's why we were seeing those. But for the most part, it just feels out of place and unnecessary. And then another thing that didn't work well with this game was the open world. Basically, there's nothing really to do but look around. And probably my most hated aspect of this game was the driving mechanics. Basically, I was crashing into everyone, just trying to get from point A to point B. Basically, after a certain point in the game, I just started fast traveling to every place I needed to go. And there was one segment where it was like they have these like action scene segments where they're usually chases, but they're also like on foot chases, and if you fail them enough times, they'll just bring up this message saying, look, you want to jump to the next part so you can enjoy the story. I had to succumb and say yes to one of these because I just couldn't get past this one. I guess you could say set piece, you could call them. Graphically, some of the graphics are really rough, especially with smaller inanimate detailed objects like a box of cigarettes in a guy's hand. They spend most of their graphical money on the motion capture work, on the actors' faces. They employed this brand new motion capture technology that actually captured the actors' faces, and there were a couple of side characters you only meet once. It's like, oh, I recognize that actor, because they did live motion facial capturing on them. It's a couple of story elements that just didn't make a whole lot of sense, and by the time this game was over, I was so glad it was over, because it just kind of dragged on for too long. But the initial concept was absolutely fascinating. I could absolutely see the possibility of them making a sequel to this set in a different time era. Maybe the 60s, or even maybe during like the early 90s Rodney King riots. That'd actually be a really interesting setting for a sequel to this game, LA Noire. But it's just the execution was really rough. That was the problem with this game. It was an interesting concept, and a lot of really interesting moments. the interrogations could actually be really cool, because I was asking guys about evidence I had collected, and you could easily miss a piece of evidence and not have that thread of questioning to ask a person. And one piece of evidence could completely change whether you were looking at one guy or another guy at who might have been the suspect. It was a really interesting game mechanic concept, and I wish more people did more with this. But that led me to another issue I have with this game. This game, the best time to play it is the first time. Only once. Second time you play it, you're going to know some of the answers to these questions. You're going to know where certain clues are. It's going to be a lot easier the second time around. And unfortunately, that kind of takes away some of the fun of what the entire point of this game is. To see if you yourself could be an amazing detective. Now, don't get me wrong. If you said, oh yeah, I'll be an amazing detective, I beat L.A. Noire, you're going to come off as an idiot. It's kind of a fun gimmick. Hey, how good would you be at being a detective? This is in no way supposed to be, yeah, I'm signed up for the police force because I completed L.A. Noire. You're going to be laughed out of there. Okay? So, do not misunderstand what I'm saying. As a fun gimmick, it's an interesting way to see if you'd be a good detective. And I myself would be a so-so detective, according to this game. Because there were a few times that just, like, hey, you should have looked here for clues. I thought I looked everywhere for clues. One thing I did do, I would recommend you doing this, is I turned off the feature where the music stops playing when you find all the clues, okay? It shouldn't be that easy. I figured it should actually be kind of a challenge to find clues everywhere. Now, there were a couple of times I regretted doing that. Especially towards the end when they rushed. The last segment, the arson segment, felt very, very rushed. And after watching that documentary video from what happened, you kind of understand why things were rushed. But there were a couple of times I regretted turning off that feature where the music shuts off when you find all the clues. However, during like the murder chapter and the traffic chapter, it was great, because I truly felt like some of the cases I lost were because of my actions, not because the game sucked. And I wanted to go back, but I forced myself not to go back and try and redo those cases, because kind of the point is you have to live with your consequences when dealing with a murder mystery. And so, just the whole concept was fascinating. The execution needed a lot more work. And that's why at the beginning of this video I said I don't know if this is worth getting or not. Now, if you are interested, this came out on PC, PlayStation 3, and Xbox 360, but it was also re-released with an HD remastered on the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One. It doesn't stop there. They also came out with a VR version of this game. Now, it's not as long. It's actually has a couple of the cases missing, which actually might be a good thing. And I'm pretty sure it's on PC, but I'm absolutely sure it's on PlayStation VR. So, if you love the concept of walking around in 1947 LA, then yeah, you'll probably want to get that version. But I have a PlayStation VR, and I was not enticed to get the VR version of this game. I think just the standard version is decent enough. If you love murder mysteries and the idea of a detective or a Sam Malone type style story, then yeah, this is probably worth getting a copy. If you're not really into any of that though, you might want to pass. So, I personally don't really see myself playing this more than one more time in my life. which isn't really that good of a thing, considering. Yes, I probably might play this again someday, but it's not a must-own. Definitely worth trying out just to see this interesting new type of game mechanic that unfortunately no one else has tried since. So, anyway, my name's Chris. That's my look back at LA Noire 9 years later. So, hope that helps you guys, and that's all.